It began with the sound of water dripping from a cracked faucet, slow, echoing, almost mournful in the silent apartment, while a man stood hunched over the sink, scrubbing the same plate long after it was already clean. His hands trembled, not from the chill of the late hour, but from the weight he carried inside. The kitchen light flickered, casting long shadows across the small space, turning the tired father into a silhouette of quiet heartbreak. Behind him, the clock glowed 12:47 a.m., marking yet another night he had been unable to sleep. And just as he shut off the faucet and wiped his weary face, he heard a small voice from the hallway, a voice too soft to belong to anything but a child who had witnessed far too much for his age. The boy whispered the words that froze the father in place. "Daddy, she's still here." If you're watching this and believe in kindness, healing, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps stories like this reach more hearts. The father, Daniel, closed his eyes for a moment, letting those words sink deep into the cracks of his exhausted spirit. His son, little 7-year-old Liam, stood barefoot in dinosaur pajamas, holding a small toy truck to his chest as though it were the last piece of protection he had left in the world. His hair was messy from sleep, but his eyes were wide awake, reflecting something both innocent and afraid. Daniel swallowed as he approached him, kneeling down despite the stiffness in his back. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's head, trying his best to smile, even though he felt himself crumbling inside. He whispered soft reassurances a father is supposed to give, even when he isn't sure he believes them. But inside, he knew what his son meant, not literally, not as a ghostly presence, but as the leftover storm that refused to leave their small home. Liam was talking about his mother. She had left 2 months ago, walked out with nothing but a duffel bag and a storm of tears. And though her absence echoed in every corner of their lives, her memory still lingered in the walls, the routines, the tiny things she used to do without anyone noticing. She was gone, and yet she wasn't, and the boy felt it stronger than anyone. Liam lifted Daniel into his arms and carried him to the small bedroom at the end of the hallway. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, the scent she used to love. Liam curled into him, small fingers gripping Daniel's shirt, as if he let go, his father might vanish next. So Daniel stayed until the boy's breathing steadied and his grip loosened. Only then did he return to the kitchen, leaning against the cold counter, staring at the sink filled with soapy water and broken reflections of his tired eyes. It hadn't always been like this. There had been laughter once, warmth, bright Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and toys scattered everywhere, nights when they danced in the living room, making silly faces, pretending life was simple and sweet. But even then, cracks had been forming beneath the surface, bills that piled up faster than he could pay them, hours added at work until he was barely home, moments when she'd sit quietly on the couch, staring at a wall with sadness she never explained. Arguments about things neither of them truly understood, shouted late enough that Liam learned to pretend he was asleep. The night she left, she didn't slam a door. She simply whispered, "I'm sorry," and was gone. And Daniel, overwhelmed by the guilt of all the things he failed to fix, had been trying to rebuild their world, one dish, one bill, one sleepless night at a time. But rebuilding alone felt like trying to stitch a wound with shaking hands. He let out a heavy breath and turned off the kitchen light. The apartment seemed darker than usual, shadows stretching across the floor like long fingers. He walked to the living room and sat on the couch, head in his hands, wondering how much longer he could keep pretending everything would be fine.
Because the truth was, things were getting worse. Work hours had been cut, rent was overdue, the power company had left 2 warning notices. He had been rationing food quietly, making sure most of it went to Liam. Some nights he gave his own dinner to the boy, telling him he wasn't hungry. Even the dishwasher he had been using broke last week, leaving him to scrub dishes late at night, alone with his thoughts and fears. Yet despite all this, he kept going. Because when you're a parent, stopping isn't an option. Breaking down isn't a luxury. You carry the world not because you're strong, but because the little hands depending on you leave you no choice. The next morning began like every other. Weak sunlight creeping through thin curtains, a cold kitchen, and the weight of bills waiting on the counter. Daniel made a simple breakfast, bread and tea, before packing Liam's bag for school. He walked him to the bus stop, kneeling to zip his jacket, planting a soft kiss on his forehead. Liam smiled faintly, the way children smile when they're trying to be strong for someone they love. On his walk back home, Daniel felt that familiar emptiness settle in his chest. He stopped when he passed the small community center near their block, a place he had ignored for months, assuming he had no time, no space, no energy for anything other than surviving. But today, a poster caught his eye. It announced a neighborhood support group for single parents. He stared at it for a long time, something inside him shifting. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was simply the need to not crumble completely alone. That evening, after dropping Liam off at a neighbor's for an hour, he walked into the center, unsure if he should turn around. The room was warm, filled with mismatched chairs and a coffee pot that steamed gently. A few people sat in a circle, faces of different ages, different losses, different battles. A woman with kind eyes greeted him, offering a seat. He hesitated but sat down. That single hour changed everything. Not because it magically solved his problems, not because anyone handed him solutions, but because for the first time in months he spoke. He let the heaviness spill out in quiet words, describing the struggle, the loneliness, the fear of not being enough. And no one judged him. No one turned away. They listened, truly listened. Sometimes that's all a heart needs to start healing. Over the next weeks, he began returning every Wednesday. He learned practical things, budgeting tips, emotional coping methods, parenting advice. But more importantly, he found community, people who understood, people who didn't let him drown in silence. They even helped him find a part-time gig washing cars on weekends, giving him just enough extra income to keep the electricity from going out. At home, subtle changes began to form. He and Liam cleaned the apartment together. They cooked small meals side by side. They laughed more, even if the laughter was fragile at first. Slowly, the house felt less like a graveyard of memories and more like a place being rebuilt with gentle hands. But it wasn't until one late night that everything shifted more deeply. It was raining heavily, thunder rolling outside. Liam had fallen asleep early after a long school day. Daniel was once again washing dishes, though this time with a calmer mind. The rain sounded almost soothing, each drop tapping against the window like a soft reminder that storms come and go. And that's when he heard a soft knock on the door.
His breath caught, because at that hour no one ever visited. He wiped his hands and opened the door, only to freeze once again. There she was, his wife, soaked from the rain, eyes swollen, hair clinging to her face. She looked fragile, almost faded, and in that moment all the resentment he thought he carried dissolved into nothing but raw, human ache. She whispered, her voice trembling, that she was sorry, that she had been struggling long before she left, sinking into a depression she didn't know how to explain, that she felt she was drowning and didn't want to drag them down with her, that she needed help, real help, and had finally found the courage to seek it. She didn't ask to come back. She didn't demand forgiveness. She simply said she missed her son and hoped someday he might forgive her. Daniel felt tears he hadn't shed in years fill his eyes, because despite everything, despite the hurt, despite the nights of fear and loneliness, she was still Liam's mother, and she was still the woman he had once loved so deeply. He invited her inside. They sat at the table, talking for hours, not about blame or anger, but about healing, boundaries, support, and what would be best for Liam. They agreed she needed more time before re-entering his life fully, but she wanted to start visiting, slowly, steadily, responsibly. And Daniel, now stronger, steadier, knew he could handle that, not because he wanted to rewrite the past, but because he wanted their son to grow with love, not with wounds. When she left that night, promising to return the next afternoon to see Liam, Daniel stood at the door feeling something unfamiliar, peace. He went to check on his son before sleeping, as he did every night, but as he gently adjusted the blanket around the small boy, Liam stirred, blinking up with sleepy eyes. He whispered again, barely audible, "Daddy, she's still here." But this time, the words held no fear, only warmth. Because children feel love even when they do not fully understand it. Daniel smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered back, "Yes, she is." And for the first time in a long time, those words didn't hurt, they healed. As days passed, Liam and his mother began reconnecting in gentle ways. Walks at the park, small conversations, drawing together. And though the road ahead was uncertain, it was no longer a road walked alone. They were building something new, not the old life, but a better one, formed with honesty and broken pieces mended with care. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. And don't forget to subscribe for more deeply emotional stories that remind us of the strength of love and healing. Before you go, comment below, "Healing takes time, and that's okay." And remember, every broken thing can be rebuilt, and every heart can find its way back to light.